Chapter 1. A Midnight Proposition. The origin of the chill is unknown, even to the wisest sages of Palantir. All we know is, because of it, Northost will never be the same. Sovrahan Whitebones, historian of the Silver Scroll. Gwenevere entered the healthy hearth cautiously. At this time of night, she knew only shifty characters could be found in the tavern. The door creaked much louder than she would have liked, but grateful warmth washed over her from within as she hastily entered. She teetered off balance for a moment, gripping the door's handle to keep herself from staggering. The world swam beneath her feet. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she closed the door behind her and squared her shoulders, determined to maintain her posture. A scarce crowd populated the spacious common room. With only one of the 4 huge hearths lit, several drunkards laughed near the flames, while half a dozen other men and women sat in the shadows and corners of the room. Drawing her thick white fur coat around her shoulders, Gwenevere made her way through the mostly unoccupied tables toward the bar, where Hexter the innkeeper greeted her. His wild red hair and beard rustled as he shook his head in surprise. "A bit late for you to be up, ain't it, Gwen?" he commented. His healthy belly flopped over the bar as he leaned forward, a mug extended in his grubby hand. "Thanks, but I'll not be drinking tonight," Gwenevere said. "What brings you to my humble tavern, if not a midnight hankering for me famous Bristlewick brandy?" Hexter asked, taking the mug he'd offered to Gwenevere and downing its contents himself. Gwenevere lowered her voice. "Hex, word around town is that a wizard arrived here in Midfield not long ago." Hexter frowned deeply. "Maybe, maybe not. What do you want to know?" Gwenevere leaned over the bar, her auburn hair falling past her ears as she whispered, "I assume he's staying here. I need to speak with him." "Gwen, child, what's gone into you?" Hexter asked, concerned. "Wizards are a bad lot. Whatever you're up to, I advise you to rethink it." Gwenevere bit her lip. "It's important, Hex." "What is? Why?" Hexter pressed. "What's gotten you looking for wizards, and at this misbegotten time of night?" Gwenevere considered telling him the truth. Hexter was a good man, after all, and she trusted him. That was more than could be said for most people. Better not tell him, she thought to herself. The fewer people that know, the better. "I desperately need the kind of help only a wizard can provide," Gwenevere said anxiously. "Please." "Whatever reason you want to do this, it better be good," Hexter sighed. "It is," Gwenevere replied. "Please, Hex, which room is the wizard staying in?" "It doesn't matter," Hexter responded weakly. "He hasn't turned in yet. He's right over there." Gwenevere followed Hexter's finger to a man sitting in a corner furthest from the burning hearth. He sat wrapped in a dark caplet, with a narrow bicorn hat resting on his curly black hair. Guinevere's heart skipped a beat when she saw the man was already staring back at her. "What's his name?" "Jacrol. He's from Palantir. Arrived a few days ago. Told me he wasn't planning on staying long." "Perfect," Gwenevere murmured. "Thank you, Hex." Gathering up her long dress, Gwenevere moved towards Jacrol. The short walk from the bar to the corner felt long due to the many eyes watching her. Everyone in the common room paid her varying amounts of interest, except for the group of drunks by the fire, all of whom were merrily sliding in and out of consciousness. The wizard kept his gaze on Gwenevere as she approached. She tried her best to walk confidently, ignoring the nausea assaulting her stomach and the pain gathering in her chest. "Now what kind of trouble has a young pretty girl like yourself gotten into, I wonder?" Jacrol asked, his voice thin and condescending. Gwenevere had been asking herself that same question. "I need your help," she said, inviting herself onto the chair across from him. Jacrol looked at her expectantly. Gwenevere took a calming breath, steadying herself by grabbing the side of the table. "What do you know about Valoith?" Jacrol's eyes narrowed. "Valoith?" he murmured. "What in the name of the celestial guardians do you want with that?" "Just tell me," Gwenevere said. Jacrol frowned. "It's a rare and dangerous poison. If you come to buy some, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. I have no idea where to find it." "I'm not looking to buy," Gwenevere told him. "I'm looking for the cure." "The cure?" Jacrol raised his eyebrows. "Have you been poisoned, girl?" "No," Gwenevere lied. "But I need the cure nonetheless." Jacrol shrugged. "There's nothing I can do. I know nothing of the cure or how to make it, nor is there any spell or rune that I know of that can aid against Valoith." "I thought as much," Gwenevere murmured, lowering her eyes. She let out a deep breath. "Then I have a proposition for you." Jacrol raised a curious eyebrow. When he said nothing, Gwenevere continued. "I need to travel to Weatherpost tonight," she said. Jacral laughed coldly. Travel? At night? Not a chance. I'm willing to pay handsomely, Gwenevere added urgently. Why not simply wait until sunup? Jacral asked. You know as well as I that the chill has no power during the day. I've got to get to Weatherpost tonight, Gwenevere insisted. She forced herself to remain calm, despite her heart pounding ever louder in her chest. She could feel her veins burning within her, and sweat gathering on her face. Her father's words echoed in her mind. 8 hours at best, probably less. Girl, you're either insane or a fool, Jacral said, shaking his head. You'll not make it half a league before an abomination spills your guts, or the chill sucks the flesh from your bones. That's why I've come to you, Gwenevere said. Jacral folded his arms, leaning back in his chair, and put his boots up on the table. Traveling by night is suicide for most, and difficult even for skilled wizards. How much are you offering? He looked over Guinevere's lavish white coat, acknowledging she clearly came from money. How much would it take? She asked shrewdly. Jacral chuckled. He took off his bicorn hat, letting his long black curls fall carelessly over his bony shoulders. Rubbing his chin, he took a moment to think. I'd take you for 400 blocks, nothing less. Done, Gwenevere said at once, making Jacral give a start of disbelief. His cool countenance wavered as he cocked his head at Gwenevere, obviously surprised she had taken up his outrageous price so easily. And if I asked for more? He asked snidely. I'll give you 200 now, and the other half upon safe arrival at Weatherpost, Gwenevere replied, not answering his question. Jacral considered the situation seriously for the first time. I'm interested, but I'm no outlander. I cannot promise you complete safety. Like I said, travel by night is dangerous no matter who you're with. The journey to Weatherpost, if we keep a brisk pace, can be done in 5 hours. The sun won't rise for another 2 or 3 after that. That would have us traveling completely by night. Excellent, Gwenevere replied hastily. Do you accept my terms? 5 hours to get there, she thought, panic rising in her chest. That was cutting it dangerously close. If we encounter only a few chillings, we'll be all right, Jacral muttered, his eyes calculating rapidly. Of course, you can never predict what'll come out of the shadows of the outside. An abomination would finish us for sure. Gwenevere didn't want to waste any more time. They needed to get moving, and quickly. She desperately unlatched a bag full of clinking cubes from her side and placed it on the table. Here's 100 blocks, she said firmly. I'll pay you 100 more before leaving, and double that in Weatherpost. You in or out? Jacral's eyes widened greedily as he fastened upon the pouch. He reached to take it, but Gwenevere pulled it back. You in or out? She repeated. Jacral considered her with a dark glare, and then sneered. If you pay that much, I'll take you. Picking up his hat, he placed it upon his head before rising from his chair and putting forth his hand. Gwenevere extended the money bag, and Jacral eagerly snatched and opened it. His eyes lingered greedily upon the contents within. Girl, you've got yourself a deal, he said. We leave immediately. While Jacral headed back to his room to gather his things, Gwenevere slid inconspicuously back onto the street. A biting breeze buffeted her face upon opening the tavern door. The night sky was, as usual, blanketed in broiling clouds. Gwenevere folded her arms beneath the white fur draped over her shoulders, eyeing the skies warily. Gwen? A voice called from the shadows. Gwenevere peered into the darkness. A young man, just over Guinevere's age, approached from the alley beside the healthy hearth. A sword hanging at his side, his dark leather armor allowed him to almost blend into the shadows of the alley. Gwenevere could only find him in the darkness because of his long, starkly blonde hair. Oh, Lawrence, she said, moving to stand beside him. How much money did you get? As much as Father would let me take, Lawrence replied. Hopefully it'll be enough for our needs. Did you get at least 300 blocks? Gwenevere asked nervously. Lawrence gave her a stern look. Did you already find the wizard? When Gwenevere nodded, Lawrence rolled his eyes irritably. I told you to wait for me, sis. He could be dangerous. I got impatient, Gwenevere said dismissively. Lawrence gave her a look that informed Gwenevere they were far from done with this conversation, but returned to business. Does the wizard have a cure? He asked hopefully. Gwenevere shook her head. It looks like Father was right when he said we've got to get to Nildar to Sage. Lawrence sighed. On to the backup plan, then. How much are we paying him to take us to Weatherpost? 400 blocks, Gwenevere said. I gave him the 100 I had, but he'll be expecting 300 more. Please say you got that much. We've got enough, Lawrence replied. Honestly, I expected him to ask for more. Don't let anybody know how much we could pay if we needed to, Gwenevere told him, glancing nervously back at the inn's door. I'd rather not ask Father for more money. We're stretching it as it is. Besides, I got plenty of shifty looks in there for some creepy folks." "Did you expect anything different?" Lawrence snorted. "Gwen, this whole ordeal is dangerous. I don't like it." "You get any better ideas?" Gwenevere hissed. "You heard what Father said. Nildark's the only one that can help me, and we've only got 8 hours, at best. We might only have 6 or 7. You know how long the journey to Weatherpost is on foot? 5 hours. We've got no time to—" She broke off as a wave of nausea hit her so hard she staggered. Lawrence steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. "Careful, Gwen," he said. "Don't upset yourself. The faster your blood pumps, the faster the Voloith will move through your system. It's only been an hour since you were poisoned, so we have 7 more, give or take. If it's 5 hours to Weatherpost, we'll arrive with plenty of time." "It's painful, Lawrence," she muttered, putting her hand to her head. "We'll get to Nildark, I promise," Lawrence told her. "Blast, what I'd give for some horses." "You know full well the only man in town with horses is our father," Gwenevere said. "He'll have them guarded," Lawrence said bitterly. "There's no way we'd make it past Jinx," Gwenevere sighed. Lawrence exhaled noisily. He folded his arms and leaned against the alley wall. "On foot, traveling at night? This is suicide." "We don't have a choice," Gwenevere said. "And Ravon?" Lawrence asked. "Where is he in all this?" A pang of grief stabbed Gwenevere. She closed her eyes, hating the memory of the horrified expression on Ravon's face as he ran from her. "He took off the second we found out about the lunar conjunction and what happened that night," she murmured. "He's terrified." "He's more worried about himself than you," Lawrence growled. "I never did like him, Gwen. Told you to stay away from him, I did." "He's not so bad," Gwenevere began, but Lawrence continued angrily. "If he ever cared about you, he would have stayed to help. And now he's gone, and he doesn't even know you're poisoned. He should be here at your side." A sudden pain stabbed Guinevere's gut. She staggered, inhaling sharply. Lawrence's anger fled, replaced by concern. Moving to Guinevere's side, he let her lean on him. "We've got to get to Nildark," he said. "I know," she murmured. The tavern door opened. Lawrence drew his sword as Jacral stepped onto the street, now with a bulging pack strapped to his back and carrying a lantern. "Come," he announced. "The sooner this is over, the better." Lawrence narrowed his eyes suspiciously at Jacral. "You sure we can trust him?" he whispered. "No," Gwenevere replied, "but we don't have any other options." Jacral looked at Lawrence, eyeing his sword and leather armor with an unimpressed glance. "Who's your bodyguard?" the wizard asked Gwenevere. "You think he can do more with that sword than I can with my magic?" "You were meant to protect me from the abominations of the outside," Gwenevere said, standing between them. She put a hand on Lawrence's sword and forced him to lower it, much to his irritation. "This is Lawrence, my brother. He's meant to protect me from you if need be." Jacral chuckled darkly. "Not to worry, young sap. I have every intention of getting you to Weatherpost alive. Now give me the other 100 blocks you owe me before we leave, and I'll expect the remaining 200 in Weatherpost." "Lead us to the edge of town first," Lawrence said, keeping his sword raised. Jacral pursed his lips. Gwenevere looked from Lawrence to Jacral nervously, scared that the intensity of their glaring would start a fire between them. "Fine," Jacral eventually sighed. "As long as I get the money. Come on." He turned and strode away. "Stay close to me, all right?" Lawrence whispered. Gwenevere nodded in agreement. They followed the wizard uneasily through the small town of Midfeld, the cobblestone street beneath them lit only by Jacral's swinging lantern and the occasional flash of lightning. The silence was interrupted by the angry rumbling of thunder and the soft patter of rain that began to fall around them. Gwenevere stayed at Lawrence's side, grateful for his steadying hand and protective sword. The old wooden buildings around them grew increasingly intermittent as they moved out of Midfeld proper and traversed through the surrounding tilting fields. Gwenevere barely recognized the few scant farmhouses and barns they passed, having only traveled this far from home in the light of day. They stopped upon reaching a weak, poorly cared-for wooden fence that stretched on to their left and right. A single lamp-post stood at the fence's gate, unlit and swinging fiercely as the wind picked it up. Gwenevere glanced over the fence and saw nothing but grey desolation stretching on as far as the eye could see. "This is the end of Midfeld's circle of protection," Jacral announced. He extended a hand to Lawrence. "I'll take the 100 blocks before we continue." "First, what assurances can you give us?" Lawrence demanded. "What are you going to do to keep us alive?" "I'll let you know once I have my money," Jacral snapped. Lawrence seemed about to object, but Gwenevere raised a hand. "Just hand it over, please," she pleaded. Expression hardening in frustration, Lawrence looked ready to argue, but didn't. He took a pouch from his side and handed it to Jacral. The wizard glanced inside it and nodded in satisfaction. Kneeling on the wet ground, he set his lantern down and swung his pack from off his back. After placing the money pouch somewhere within the pack, He proceeded to withdraw 3 small identical glass vials full of deep red liquid. "You'll want to drink these," he said, handing one to each of them. "What is it?" Lawrence asked suspiciously. "A potion containing the enchantment of a rune of preservation," Jaqural replied. "It will give us protection from the chill." Gwenevere shivered at the sound of it. The chill. She had heard the stories, as everyone had. Now, for the first time, she'd be facing it herself. Lawrence, despite looking extraordinarily uncomfortable with the prospect of drinking a foreign potion, did not object after Jaqural agreed to drink his potion first. The wizard downed the liquid in a single gulp. Gwenevere attempted to do the same, but the liquid was thick and syrupy, with a taste like rotten meat. She gagged and struggled to force it down. It took several gulps to empty the small vial, after which she coughed haggardly. "What is that?" she wheezed. Jaqural grinned, his teeth stained red from the potion. It looked far too much like blood. "I think it'd be better if I don't tell you," he told her. After Lawrence drank his, Jaqural collected the empty vials and put them back into his bag. He then drew forth a small, pointed crystal, about the size of Guinevere's thumb. The crystal was green, not in a pleasant emerald hue, but a nauseating tone. It glowed softly in a way that made Gwenevere feel uncomfortable. "Stand close together," Jaqural ordered, still kneeling. He began to trace symbols into the ground using the crystal, which left glowing marks in its wake. The wizard drew these peculiar runes in a ring around Gwenevere and her brother. When finished, he rose, joining them in the glowing circle, pocketed the crystal, and grasped them both by the wrists. Closing his eyes, he uttered several guttural words in a strange language. Lawrence looked ready to chop off Jaqural's arm, but remained rigidly still during the incantation. Gwenevere felt sweat dripping down her face despite the cold rain. Jaqural's hands seemed to burn her wrist. As the wizard spoke, the runes on the ground flared brightly and then vanished. Guinevere's queasiness increased rapidly, and as soon as Jaqural released her, she fell on her knees and vomited. "What did you do?" Lawrence demanded, putting his sword to the wizard's throat. "That's a natural reaction," Jaqural replied offhandedly. "I traced the rune of warding. It will deter any wild animals we may encounter." Gwenevere remained on the ground trembling, mud staining her dress. "Come, we have no reason to dally," Jaqural said, and he moved to stand at the gate. "Are you going to be all right?" Lawrence asked, kneeling beside her. "I think so," she replied hoarsely, the taste of vomit strong on her tongue. She allowed Lawrence to help her stand, but she couldn't stop shaking. Despite what Jaqural said, she knew her feeling sick was not only due to the spell he had cast. Her stomach was not just churning for magic and nerves, but Veloith. Gwenevere closed her eyes and shook her head. She still didn't like thinking about what had happened the night of the lunar conjunction. She had had half a mind to do what Ravon had done. As foolish as that had sounded, she simply wanted to run and pretend she could escape her troubles. "If I don't reach Nildark soon, I'm dead," she reminded herself. "I'll have to deal with everything else after I'm cured." She grasped Lawrence's hand and gave him a serious look. "You don't have to come," she told him. "You can stay and follow in the morning. If Nildark can save me, I'll be there when you arrive. If not," her voice trailed off, "your presence won't really change anything. You don't need to risk your life too." "I'll not be abandoning you, sis," Lawrence said. "Whatever happens next, we'll do it together." Gwenevere knew it made more sense for Lawrence to remain in Midfeld, safe behind the circle of protection during the night, but she was grateful for his support. She gave him a desperate hug, squeezing him tightly. "What did I ever do to deserve a brother like you?" she whispered. "All right, enough," Jaqural snapped. "Those potions in my rune only last so long. Let's get a move on you, saps." He unlatched the decrepit gate and pulled. It swung open easily. "No turning back now," Jaqural said with a red-stained grin, and he stepped into the outside. Holding Lawrence's hand in her own, heart pounding and waves of nausea threatening to overtake her, Gwenevere followed.